Hi everyone. Thanks to our IT people at MVCC and the folks at the Cultural Series, and also the people in the International Initiatives Committee for organizing this event. I know that these are strange times, so thanks for logging in virtually, and I hope that you enjoy the presentation. So I am talking today about global parenting, and we're going to explore a little bit about cultural norms for raising children throughout the world. So let's begin. All right, so who am I? My name is Emily Gifford, and I'm the coordinator of International Student Services here at Mohawk Valley Community College. So I work with international students from around the world, but I've also lived in Brazil during high school, and I lived in Chile in college, and both those places I lived with a host family, so I got to experience what it's like to live with a different family and have different cultural norms. And basically, I've also had the opportunity to travel the world and have been to over 30 countries, which has gotten me really interested in learning about different cultures and how different countries approach the same issues that we have here, but in different ways. So this is a picture of my family. I just had a baby in March, and so part of my motivation for learning about how different cultures parent was for figuring out how we want to raise our son in this world, and what things we want to take from different cultures to raise our kid to be a global citizen. So I'm going to share some of those with you. So as you can see here, I did a lot of reading while I was pregnant. These are 6 books that I'm going to refer to through this presentation. So feel free to check those out. They're all really wonderful reads, actually. And so they explore different cultures from around the world, and different tidbits that we can maybe use in our lives. And so I think one of the things that I've learned is that American parents often worry about buying the appropriate product to support their children's interests, or else the potential will lag. And so there's this focus on whether their child is reading the fastest or crawling the soonest, and it's very developmentally goal-oriented, and also American families often focus on who has the nicest toys, or who has the most top-of-the-line stroller or car seat. And so one of the first questions you get, like, which car seat are you getting, and that kind of thing. And so as we look through this, look at different cultures, we can see different they're emphasizing on different values throughout the world. So the first one we're going to look at is German culture. And so I know that there's a stereotype that Germans are very rigid and structured, but it seems like among parents and when raising children, they focus on actually having freedom for their kids and allowing them to have what they call, free play or simple play. And so the idea around that is letting their kids engage in play that's not guided by teachers, not guided by parents or adults, and just let the children explore and be creative on their own. And so German culture is very much, parenting culture is very much focused on meeting fears head on. So instead of fearing fire at German daycare centers, they actually have children learn about matches and lighters and how to use them safely. And instead of policing their children's play, they let kids just play in the park by themselves and without adult supervision. So sometimes the kids are allowed to walk across the street or the park down the street and play, or walk to school on their own or bike to school. So it really fosters this sense of independence among their children. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is that German schools near Christmas time will, their daycare centers will clear out the toys, and they'll encourage the students to play without toys and then be a little bit more creative in their play, because they have to use their imagination more. So this idea of having less being more. So I was reading about in Kenya, strollers aren't really needed, and they're impractical and unaffordable. And so a lot of the streets in Kenya they don't have sidewalks, or if they do have sidewalks, they're poorly maintained, or there's some dirt, and so it's really hard to push a stroller. And some of the more affluent parents have seen, these United States or Western culture using strollers, and so they bought fancy strollers and then realized that they can't use them. So most Kenyans will wear their baby in a sling or a front carrier or a back carrier. And there's been correlation between, I don't know if it's causation, but correlation between babies that are attached to their moms as having them cry less than babies that aren't held as often. And also that the mothers produce more milk and are less likely to experience postpartum depression. All right, so now we're going to look at Argentinian kids. So in Argentina, parents often will let their children stay up later than what we find standard in the United States. And so children are encouraged to participate with their families in gatherings such as birthday parties, or if the parents are going to a restaurant or something like that, then the kids are welcome to join in that. And so it makes for a later bedtime for the kids, but they seem to adjust well and still be able to wake up in the morning. And so, I think oftentimes, at least in the United States, there's a very structured sleep schedule for kids. And although I think that many Argentinian families use this structure, they're also willing to deviate from it if the occasion is important for the family. Okay, so I love this quote. I wanted to share it with you. This idea of being a good parent. I think there's a lot of pressure for parents to strive to a certain standard, but I like this quote, so I'll read it. We may or may not adopt what another family in another culture or place does. We can take comfort in knowing that there is more than one good way to get a baby to sleep, transport her from place to place, and feed her. There are many ways to be a good parent in the world. So this idea that there's not just one way to be a parent, and that we can gather information from different cultures to do that. All right, next we're going to look at the Finnish philosophy. Finnish family children are actually ranked the highest, are some of the highest academic achievers, but they actually have a lot of free time, a lot of play time, and recesses during the day. And one of the things that I really liked about Finnish culture are these things called baby boxes. And we actually slept our son in a baby box when he was born. So the hospitals will give out a box that's filled with different goodies like onesies and diapers and wipes and that kind of thing. And then the box actually has a mattress at the bottom, and so you can use the box as a bassinet for your kid to sleep in. And it's reduced the number of children that have SIDS, which is sudden infant death syndrome. So it's prevented a lot of babies' deaths. And it also just is this welcoming support item for new parents. The other thing, and with that sentiment in Finnish culture, there's much more involvement of parents in infancy and in toddlerhood than maybe the American counterparts. So they think that it's important for kids to sort of be coddled at the younger age and then be given more independence as they grow older. Whereas I think oftentimes in American culture, it's pretty young, we put kids in daycare, and then as they get older, we start being a little bit of helicopter parents. So it's almost the reverse, and almost counterintuitive. All right, so I'm going to look at French parenting. One of the thoughts about French parents is that the children are listening. And so French parents think that children and infants are actually rational beings and can learn. And so with that, they try to communicate to the kids in that way. So they'll say please and thank you, and try to teach them from a very young age, from birth, that politeness is important. So they try not to use a condescending sing-song voice, but talk to them like you would talk to an adult. There's the other philosophy that no foods are kid foods. So French parents will feed their kids more or less what they eat. And that's the same in state-run daycares, which are called creches. The kids are given they're given tons of vegetables and different creative mixes of foods. And kids aren't allowed to say, hey, I don't like that. Or they can say it, but then they have to try it again, and they have to explain why, and they're taught to explore texture and color and that kind of thing. So maybe they're more engaged in food and enjoying it. The other thing is that, so French parents have this thing that's called the pause. And so when their kids are sleeping, if they start crying, they'll wait a couple minutes. So they'll wait maybe 5 minutes or so, give a pause, and that'll give the child a little bit of time to, if it's just something that's passing, like, oh, we had a bad dream, crying, maybe they'll fall back to sleep, and on their own. So it encourages the child to work it out a little bit, but it's not the same as like the cry it out method where they just are left unattended. It's just this pause, let's see. And many French children learn to sleep through the night a lot faster than their American counterparts, presumably because of us. And then the last thing is that patience isn't just a virtue, it's an expectation. So French families believe that it's important for kids to learn to cope with frustration and also delay gratification. So it's a skill that kids are going to have to learn at some point, so they try to foster it at a young age and teach them accordingly. So patience is valued, and then they try to cultivate a sense of calm among their kids. And with that, parents try not to drop everything to attend to their kids. They really try to be like, hey, right now, do you see that I'm working on cooking? Like, can you hold on for a second and then I'll look at your artwork or something like that. Just talk to them and say like, hey, here's why I'm making you wait for a second, but I am gonna make you wait. All right. So now we'll go to Asia and look at Japanese parenting. So Japanese parents focus a lot on the idea of responsibility and independence. And with that, there's this very interesting concept of that Japanese parents let their children fight. So, and not just parents, but in daycares as well. So you might see kids in a full-on conflict, not violent conflict, but arguing with each other, and the daycare provider won't intervene at all. And the idea around this is to teach the kids, to value that they're a member of the community and they're going to have to sort things out among each other and figure out how to resolve conflict, even at a young age. So it teaches them the art of resolving conflict and being part of a community. So Japanese families will often ask their young kids, like first graders, to run family errands, or as you can see in this picture down here, the students are walking to school on their own, and it gives, without supervision, so it gives this developing of self-reliance and forming of judgment as well. And so the other thing that I thought was really interesting is that Japanese teachers will focus on building strength of character and persistence, and they value like effort put into something rather than necessarily just the end goal. So I think oftentimes in American culture, we just celebrate success, and we don't always look at like ways to improve. And so the Japanese are very focused on like, yeah, we did well at that, but how can we make it better next time? And so there's this reflection and also, this room for improvement. And this is a really interesting thing in Japanese schools. The kids are actually the people who clean the schools. So each classroom will rotate through different chores within the schools, and it teaches the kids to be respectful of their environment and to work together, right? When they're cleaning, they're working together. And it gives them a sense of pride in their space. It fosters this sense of being, making sure, you're not gonna end up throwing things on the floor if you know that you're gonna have to clean it later. So there's a very high standard of cleaning at a young age, but also, an independence and responsibility that's grown through that. The other thing that I thought was interesting, I feel like in American culture, it's often assumed that in the teenage years, that kids are going to be disrespectful. It's just assumed that that's going to happen. It's like, oh, well, that phase of being disrespectful. But that's not a thing that happens really in Asia. It's not assumed, and then it doesn't happen. So they're taught to respect and to be part of a community, and I think that's emulated throughout their childhood, throughout teenage years as well. So we talked a little bit about eating for French kids, which I think is a very big focus for the French. Food is a big focus. But one of the things that they definitely do with young kids who are weaning and then starting to eat more than just milk or formula, they start on vegetables. So I feel like in the US, it's very common, like everyone's just like, oh yeah, of course you start feeding your kids cereals. Like that's the first thing, rice cereal, oat cereal, something like that. But that's not, that's just a cultural thing. It doesn't have to be that way. Like I think that oftentimes we just think, okay, this is the way it's done because that's what our parents did, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only way to do things. So yeah, French introduced vegetables. In Korea, they serve kids spicy food. In India, they put turmeric in the baby's food, which is supposed to be an anti-inflammatory in their food and helps the baby to not have swelling. So different first foods are introduced. Even young babies in Japan will eat fish, no problem. So what our kids are willing to eat and interested in eating is really determined by what we present to them, right, and how we present it. So I think that's really interesting. So the French will introduce food several times. So if a baby doesn't like it one way, then they'll try to cook it a different way, and then encourage them to get familiarized with it with different spices, maybe, or boiled instead of sautéed the next time. So also, sleeping is an interesting thing that varies between different countries. So up here you can see, this is actually a picture from Scandinavia. I'm not sure which country, I think it was Iceland. But a lot of Scandinavian countries will leave their kids out in strollers in front of cafes to sleep, to nap. So they'll be inside having a coffee and just let their kid stay outside and sleep. And the thought is that kids will sleep better in fresh air, which I know for my kid, he loves napping outside. So I've been trying to use this idea, but I know that in the United States, if you leave your kid unattended, you'll probably get the authorities called on you. But it's very common in Scandinavia. The other thing that I know in American parenting, or at least if you talk to your pediatrician, they really discourage co-sleeping, so sleeping in the same bed as your kid. But in Asia and Europe, it's done often. So many kids will grow up sleeping, maybe several years or months with their parents in the same bed. And it's said to reinforce the relationship between the mother and child, and building well, it says a healthy sense of independence, so I think that's interesting. But I think it just builds self-confidence. They feel loved within their family a little bit more. But I think that it's important to mention that, like in Japan, where co-sleeping is very common, they have futons that are on the floor, so they sleep on the floor. So there's no risk of their kid falling off the bed like it is here. American beds are usually raised off the floor, so the risk of a child falling out of the bed is higher. In Nigeria, they will never let the baby cry. Like as soon as the baby cries and it's asleep, they'll go and attend to it. So that's a little different from the French laws. In Dutch culture in the Netherlands, there's routines are very important. So their kids have a set sleep schedule every day, and they get almost 2 hours per day more sleep than the American counterparts of babies. So sleep is definitely valued there, and they try to focus daily activities at home and like more calm activities when they have infants. So that the babies will be less oversensitized and be calm and sleep longer. I don't know if you can see this picture. So potty training in China, or at least in some areas of China, they use this theory of elimination training, and they have these split bottom pants, which allow the kid to squat in the streets or wherever they are to go to the bathroom. And I know that this would not work in the United States, but kids in China are often potty trained by the time they're 6 or 12 months, which is much earlier than most American kids. Most American kids learn around 18 months to 2 years to even 3 years. So they are much quicker at potty training. They're also taught to go to the bathroom on command by making a sound, either a shing sound or a whistle. And so their parents can sort of initiate their use of the bathroom based on a little sound. So apparently Dutch kids are, according to a UNICEF report, they are the happiest kids in the world. And some of the theories behind this are that Dutch don't focus as much on grades or GPA, and they're much more focused on education as being a route to a child's well-being and personal development. So much less worried about what test scores they get and more like, hey, what have you learned and how have you grown and developed as a human? So there's less stress built around that. There's also, so you can see this picture, that they, for breakfast, they'll have sprinkles on their bread, and that's a theory as to why they're some of the happiest kids. But also as part of another eating routine, the Dutch families will eat all meals together, including breakfast. And so they really value that together time, and kids and adults and everyone in the family will not eat until everybody's at the table. So it's this sense of belonging. The other thing is Dutch families do what's called a negotiation-based parenting. And in the book, it was talking about, like, this is not for the faint of heart, because you're negotiating or debating with a toddler sometimes can be a little bit difficult, and exhausting, and so it takes a lot of patience. But it gets more buy-in from the children. So rather than saying, like, you have to go to bed now, they might say, like, why a kid needs to go to bed early. So it'll be like, hey, I need you to go to bed early so you can get plenty of sleep and then grow and grow tall and be strong like everybody else, or whatever it is. So have an explanation for why you're doing things. And then the kids can actually give a rebuttal to that. So they can say, like, no, I didn't want to, and here's why. And so they learn the skills of negotiation at a young age. The other thing that Dutch families will do and parents will do is they have all-weather biking. So the Netherlands is all about biking. Like, they have bike lanes in every city. There's bikes all over the place. With that is all-weather biking. So it really is a character-forming experience. So they'll bike in snow and wind and rain, and it teaches them grit and learning that life isn't always sunny, life isn't always rainbows, and that they have to face the elements and learn not to give up. So in Italy, there's this concept of socializing their kids. At a young age, we'll bring kids to all sorts of gatherings, pass the kid around, have grandparents, have friends hold the kids. And the practice is, the idea is to help prevent separation anxiety for the kids. And so they feel comfortable around different people, and are less likely to have that clinging stage that many American kids often go through. So they introduce babies to new people at a young age. So I just want to thank you all. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for coming in person. And if anybody has any questions, my email is here, egifford@mvcc.edu. As I mentioned, I'm the coordinator of International Student Services here at MVCC, so I actually run the MVCC Global Instagram account, so if you want to follow me or message me on there, you're more than welcome to. Do you have any questions?
Do you feel like the French way of teaching the kids to try the food again if they don't like it, does it sometimes teach them to maybe appreciate the food, or just make sure that they don't like that it's not like some stereotype, greens are bad kind of thing among kids?
So I think that their whole format is really a good way to teach kids to enjoy food. So French culture also has built in much more time for meals. So I know in a lot of schools in the United States, like, you get 15 minutes for lunch and 15 minutes for recess, and like boom, 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 and it's like you can't digest in that time, right? You can't. There's no way to digest. There's no way to even appreciate food, right? So the French, even from a young age, will have these long lunch times, and they're actually in preschools. They have chefs. So there are committees in France, like countrywide or statewide, that meet and talk about the menus for these preschools, right? And so it'll be like, okay, well, this vegetable is in season now, so let's cook this for the kids. So there's this much more. Students are much more excited about food because they know where it comes from too, and they talk about, like, they talk about it. They talk about food, they talk about texture, they talk about color. So it's more exciting, and they also try to, they engage, at a young age, parents will engage kids in cooking as well. So they have these easy recipes for toddlers, so it'll be like, oh, this cake that everything uses one yogurt container. So the yogurt container is like, what, a cup and a half or something? So it's like one yogurt container of flour, one yogurt container, and so it's super easy for kids to do, but then they're like, I made a cake. And then they're more likely to eat it. So, I think that they definitely appreciate foods more, and this trying repeatedly and cooking different ways, I think, is like a sneaky way to get them to like it, right? So maybe you didn't like spinach the first time, but like, what if we add heavy cream? Maybe then you like spinach, and then, we can try to introduce it again in a little bit more healthy way. So, yeah. Any other questions?
You did mention that your kid likes to sleep outside.
Yeah.
So from your presentation, what other methods of parenting have you or are you going to implement in a sense?
That's a great question. So, actually in this picture you can see he's in a hammock on our front balcony. So we try to get him to sleep. If he didn't nap very well, we'll put him out there. We do have a stroller, but we do try to carry him in a front pack or a backpack. Because one of the things that I didn't mention, I talked about mothers feeling more connected to their kids from using a carrier. But the other thing that it teaches the kid is it actually grows, helps grow their neck muscles, because they're bobbling their head a little bit more, and then it grows, it promotes the growth of those muscles. So we've been trying to have him in the carrier more often. I definitely try not to baby talk with him as much as what I might have. So I try to talk to him like he's a rational being. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to change your diaper now, and then I'm going to go do this other thing, and then I'll be right back. So I'll tell him he can understand, But I'm hoping that that'll teach him, to be communicative or whatnot. And we did his first food was sweet potatoes, so we tried to introduce vegetables first. Although when he had peaches, that was his favorite thing. So I think the sweeter things are going to be a little bit more exciting, but hopefully he'll still appreciate vegetables. I'm trying to think what other things we've introduced. I mean, at this stage, we can't really do the Italian socializing. I would love to have him be held by a whole bunch of people, but COVID just doesn't allow that. We have tried to limit the number of toys that he has to try to make him be more creative with the toys that he does have. I didn't mention it, but so in Japanese culture, and I don't think that this is so much culturally based as space-based. So Japan has such limited spaces and such small apartments that kids just don't have very many toys. There's been studies that show the sweet spot is 11 toys. So that promotes them, trying to be more creative with the toys that they do use and being more imaginative. So what I've been doing is, as grandparents give more toys, I'm sort of hiding them away and promoting the use of only a certain number at a time, and then I'll rotate them out after a week or so. So that's what I've been doing so far, but obviously he's only 5 months, so we'll institute some more things later on. Any other questions? That's fine. So if anybody thinks of any questions, my email's right there. I do want to leave you with one quote. So in the end, perhaps it is comforting to know that parenting is so diverse and that there isn't a one-size-fits-all model. So I feel like as parents, there's a lot of pressure to get it right, whatever that means. And so just this idea of giving yourself grace and learning about how different cultures do it, that, just because your parents did it one way or, your neighbor does it one way doesn't mean that's the way you have to do it. And so, take from different cultures, and then adopt it the way you want to, and make your own little familial culture for yourselves. So, thank you, everyone.